The first bullet snapped past Captain Maya Reeves's head close enough to clip 3 strands of hair from her temple. She felt the heat of it, the angry whisper of copper-jacketed death passing within centimeters of her skull, and in that fraction of a second, every doubt ever cast upon her became meaningless. She was going to die in this valley, or she was going to prove them all wrong. There was no third option. The ambush had lasted 14 seconds. In that time, 3 American soldiers had stopped breathing forever. Maya pressed her spine against a mud brick wall. That was the only thing between her and the Pecan machine gun position 200 meters up the slope. Dust and debris rained down on her helmet as 7.62 millimeters rounds chewed through the ancient structure above her head. The air tasted like cordite and copper. Somewhere to her left, Sergeant First Class Dominguez was screaming into his radio, his voice cracking with desperation. Hammerfall, Hammerfall, this is Viper 2-1. We are in contact, heavy contact. Grid reference 37904-685. Requesting immediate air support. Danger close. How copy? The response came back broken, fragmented by the mountains that surrounded them on 3 sides. Viper 2-1. This is Hammerfall Actual. Roger your contact. Be advised. Closest air asset is Reaper Flight. Currently 40 mics out. Acknowledge. 40 minutes. Maya's stomach dropped. She had studied Taliban ambush doctrine for 3 years. She knew exactly what 40 minutes meant. It meant execution. It meant they would die here, pinned in this kill zone, picked apart by fighters who had been rehearsing this exact scenario for weeks. The insurgents had chosen this location because they knew the terrain. They knew the response times. They knew that American air power was the only thing infantry feared less than God himself, and they had calculated precisely how long they could operate before those assets arrived. They had 40 minutes to kill every American in this valley, and they intended to use every second of it. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense from here. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and sacrifice, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another mission. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 72 hours earlier, Captain Maya Reeves had stepped off a CH-47 Chinook at forward operating base Hammerfall with the dust of Kandahar still clinging to her uniform. The rotors were still spinning down when she felt it, that particular quality of silence that had nothing to do with sound. It was the silence of judgment, the silence of men deciding what you were worth before you had spoken a single word. She was 31 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, 128 pounds. Her hair was regulation length and pulled back, so tight it gave her a permanent headache by noon. Her uniform bore the insignia of military intelligence, and on her collar, the twin silver bars of a captain caught the Afghan sun. None of that mattered to the soldiers watching her descend the ramp. What they saw was a woman. Staff Sergeant Eric Volkov was the first to speak, though he waited until the Chinook had lifted off and the rotor wash had faded enough for his words to carry. Another one, he said to the specialist standing beside him. Intel sent us another analyst. How many is at this rotation? 5, Specialist Brennan replied. 3 of them lasted less than 2 weeks. The 4th made it a month before he got his shoulder torn up by an IED and got evac to Landstuhl. And this one, Brennan squinted at Maya as she shouldered her pack and began walking toward the OC. $100, says she doesn't make it through the first patrol. That's not a bet, Volkov snorted. That's charity. Look at her. She's built like my sister. My 13-year-old sister. The laughter spread like fire through dry brush, jumping from soldier to soldier until Maya could feel it pressing against her back like a physical force. She didn't turn around. She didn't acknowledge it. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. She had been surviving her entire career. The Tactical Operations Center was a sandbag bunker at the center of FOB Hammerfall, bristling with antennas and humming with the constant murmur of radio traffic. Maya pushed through the blast doors and into the relative cool of the interior, where banks of monitors cast blue light across the faces of the watch officers. The smell hit her immediately. Coffee, sweat, and a particular staleness of recycled air that had been breathed by too many people for too many hours. Major Thomas Weston looked up from a map table as she approached. His eyes moved across her rank insignia, her branch, her gender, and she watched the assessment happen in real time. She had seen that look 1,000 times. The slight tightening around the eyes. the almost imperceptible down in the mouth. "Captain Reeves," he said, his tone precisely calibrated professional courtesy without warmth. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. My transport out of Kandahar moved up, sir. I saw no reason to delay. Eager to get started? Eager to do my job." The major's eyes narrowed slightly. He was trying to read her, try to determine if there was defiance in her words or simple professionalism. Maya kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that anything could be interpreted as a challenge when you were a woman in a combat zone. Confidence became arrogance. Competence became showing off. Silence became hostility. So she said nothing more and waited. "Well," Weston said finally, "your reputation precedes you, Captain. 3 commendations for network analysis. The human work you did in Helmand Province led to the capture of 2 high-value targets. And your language skills are supposedly exceptional. Fluent in Pashto and Dari, sir. Working proficiency in Arabic. Impressive on paper." There it was, the qualifier, the subtle diminishment that reduced everything she had accomplished to theory, to abstraction, to something that hadn't been tested in the real world. As if the real world didn't include the 17 months she had spent in combat zones. As if the bullets that had passed near her in Helmand had been somehow less lethal because she processed intelligence instead of pulling triggers. "I assure you, sir, my skills are not limited to paper." "We'll see, Captain. We'll see." Weston turned back to his map table. "Sergeant Morrison will show you to your quarters. You'll receive your operational briefing at 0600 tomorrow." Dismissed. Maya saluted and left. The quarters assigned to her were a plywood hutment near the eastern perimeter, separated from the main enlisted barracks by precisely the distance that regulations require for gender segregation. It was small, 8 feet by 10 feet, with a cot, a footlocker, and a single bare bulb that flickered with every generator surge. She had seen worse. She had lived in worse. She unpacked her gear with a methodical precision that had been drilled into her at West Point, then sat on the edge of her cot and pulled out the battered notebook she carried everywhere. The pages were filled with her observations, enemy movement patterns, tribal affiliations, supply route analyses, the 1,000 details that might save lives if the right person paid attention. The question was whether anyone here would pay attention to her. By 2,100 hours, the betting pool had expanded beyond Volkov and Brennan. It now included 11 soldiers from across the FOB, with wagers ranging from $20 to $200. The rules were simple. Predict the date Captain Maya Reeves would request transfer or medical evacuation. Closest guess won the pot. The earliest prediction was 3 days. The latest was 6 weeks. No one had bet on her completing her deployment. Sergeant First Class Ricardo Dominguez heard about the pool from a corporal in the motor pool, and for a long moment, he considered saying something. He had served with female soldiers before. Good ones who would save his life and the lives of his men. He knew the statistics, knew that women in intelligence roles had proven themselves 100 times over in this war. But he also knew the culture. He knew that speaking up would make him a target, would mark him as soft, as compromised, as someone who let political correctness override tactical judgment. And he had a wife and 2 daughters back in El Paso counting on him to come home alive, which meant he needed these men to trust him absolutely when the bullets started flying. So he said nothing. He walked away. And later, in the darkness of his hutment, he told himself that it wasn't his problem, that Captain Reeves would either prove herself or she wouldn't, and nothing he said would change that fundamental truth. It was a convenient lie, and he almost believed it. Maya woke at 0430, as she always did. She ran 4 miles around the interior perimeter of the FOB while the sky was still gray with pre-dawn light, her boots kicking up dust that coated her throat and lungs. She counted 17 soldiers who stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. She counted 9 who made comments just loud enough for her to hear. She logged the workout in her notebook and showered in water that ran cold after 30 seconds. The operational briefing began at 0600 sharp. Major Weston stood at the head of the room, flanked by the company's platoon leaders and senior NCOs. A map of Darwa's district dominated the wall behind him, marked with red pins indicating known enemy positions and blue pins showing coalition patrol routes. Intelligence has identified increased insurgent activity in the village of Darwiski, Weston began. Over the past 2 weeks, We've seen a 40% uptick in communications traffic originating from or passing through this area. Sijin suggests a new Taliban commander has established operations in the region, a man known only by his radio call sign. Shaheen. Maya's pen moved across her notebook. Shaheen, Persian for Falcon. A new player, probably elevated after the previous commander was killed in a drone strike 6 weeks ago. The name suggested ambition, self-aggrandizement, a desire to be seen as swift and deadly. Psychological profile, aggressive, prone to risk-taking, possibly overconfident. She had encountered men like this before. They were dangerous precisely because they didn't follow the established playbook. They innovated. They adapted. They did things that their predecessors had been too cautious to attempt. Captain Reeves, Weston said, and Maya looked up to find every eye in the room on her. You've been reviewing the intelligence packet. What's your assessment? It was a test. She knew it was a test. Everyone in the room knew it was a test. Weston was giving her just enough rope to either climb or hang herself. She stood, her notebook open in her hands. Sir, based on the communication patterns and the timing of the traffic upticks, I believe Shaheen is preparing an offensive operation. The village of Darwizgi is strategically positioned at the junction of 3 valleys. It provides natural concealment from aerial surveillance and offers multiple egress routes if coalition forces attempt encirclement. If I were Shaheen, I would use Darwizgi as a staging area for attacks on our supply convoys or possibly on this FOB itself. A ripple of something, discomfort, skepticism, perhaps fear, passed through the room. You're saying the insurgents are going to attack the FOB? Lieutenant Cassidy asked from the second row. His tone was just shy of mocking. I'm saying the pattern suggests they're planning something significant, sir. The volume of traffic, the locations of origin, the timing, it all points to coordination at a scale we haven't seen in this district for months. Whether the target is the FOB, our patrols, or the Afghan government forces we're supporting, I can't say with certainty. But something is coming. Weston's expression remained unreadable. And what do you recommend, Captain? A careful reconnaissance of Darwizgi, sir. Not a combat patrol. That might spook them and push whatever operation they're planning into motion before we're ready. A small team, posing as a routine patrol, to gather human intelligence and confirm my analysis. I speak the languages. I know the tribal dynamics. I should be part of that team. The silence that followed was suffocating. You want to go outside the wire, Weston said slowly. You, an intelligence officer, a woman. I want to gather the intelligence necessary to protect this FOB and the soldiers under your command, sir. My gender is irrelevant to that mission. Is it? Weston's voice hardened. Captain, I've been running patrols in this valley for 8 months. I've lost 11 soldiers to ambushes, IEDs, and green-on-blue attacks. 11 families back home who will never see their sons again. And in all that time, I have never sent a female intelligence officer outside the wire. Do you know why? Because you don't believe I can handle it, sir. Because I don't want to have to write a letter to your mother explaining how you died because I sent you somewhere you didn't belong. Maya felt the words like a slap, but she didn't flinch. My mother is dead, sir. She died when I was 16. Ovarian cancer. She fought it for 4 years before it killed her. I watched her endure surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation and pain that would have broken most people. And in all that time, she never once asked anyone to protect her from reality. She faced it. She fought it. And when she lost on her feet. The room was absolutely still. With respect, Major, I am not asking you to protect me. I am asking you to let me do the job I was trained for, the job I volunteered for. The job I am better qualified to perform than anyone else in this room. For a long moment, Weston said nothing. Then he looked at Dominguez. Sergeant, you're leading the patrol to Darwizgi tomorrow. You have any objection to Captain Reeves joining your element? Dominguez's jaw tightened. He thought of the betting pool. He thought of his wife and daughters. He thought of the 11 soldiers they had lost. Then he looked at Maya, really looked at her for the first time, and saw something he hadn't expected. Not softness, not fragility. He saw the same cold determination he had seen in every soldier who had earned his respect over 2 decades of service. No objection, sir. Weston nodded slowly. Fine. Captain Reeves will accompany Viper 2-1 to Darwisky. Departure at 0730. Dismiss. The soldiers filed out of the briefing room in silence. Maya remained behind, packing up her notes, when a shadow fell across her workspace. She looked up to find Staff Sergeant Volkov standing over her, his arms crossed, his expression hostile. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that I don't care how many commendations you have. I don't care what you think you know about the enemy. When we go outside the wire tomorrow, you stay behind me, you keep your mouth shut, and you do exactly what I tell you. Are we clear?" Maya held his gaze without blinking. "Crystal, Staff Sergeant." "Good." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Captain, if you slow us down out there, if you hesitate, if you get any of my men killed because you froze when it mattered, I will personally make sure you never serve in a combat zone again." He left. Maya finished packing her notes, her hands perfectly steady. She had 37 hours to prepare for patrol that would change everything. She spent the first 12 in the Intelligence Center, reviewing 5 years of after-action reports from operations in the Darwas district. She cataloged every ambush, every IED strike, every enemy contact. She mapped the locations, the times, the tactics. A pattern emerged. The Taliban in this region didn't improvise. They followed a doctrine, a playbook developed through years of fighting against coalition forces. They preferred L-shaped ambushes, with the primary kill zone position where the terrain naturally channeled patrol movement. They initiated contact with IEDs or command-detonated mines, then shifted to direct fire from elevated positions. They always established multiple fallback routes and never engaged for more than 8 to 12 minutes before withdrawing. But the reports from the past 3 weeks showed something different. The incidents had a different signature, more aggressive, more complex, with coordinated fire from multiple positions and extended engagement times. Someone had changed the playbook. Shaheen. Maya pulled up everything they had on the mysterious new commander. SIGINT transcripts showed a man who spoke with authority, who criticized his predecessors for their caution, who promised his fighters a victory that would echo throughout the valley. He referenced coordinates that corresponded to locations along the primary patrol route to Darwisky. He was planning something for that road. Maya was certain of it. She compiled her analysis into a written assessment and submitted it to Major Weston at 2,200 hours. He read it while she waited, his expression darkening with each page. "You're telling me there's a high probability of ambush on the route to Darwisky?" "Yes, sir." "Based on communication patterns and historical analysis?" "Yes, sir." Weston set down the papers. "Captain, I appreciate your thoroughness, but I've had intelligence officers tell me ambushes were coming a dozen times in the past year. Half the time, nothing happened. The other half, the ambush came from somewhere completely different than predicted. Forgive me if I don't reroute a patrol based on your reading of radio traffic. Sir, I'm not asking you to reroute the patrol. I'm asking you to ensure we're prepared. Increase the QRF response capability. Position air assets closer than normal. Give us every possible advantage if my assessment is correct. And if it isn't, if I pull resources from other operations based on your hunch and nothing happens, then you'll have lost nothing, sir. But if I'm right and we're not prepared, you could lose everyone on that patrol." Weston was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded once. "I'll see what I can do about air assets." "No promises." Dismiss. It wasn't enough. Maya knew it wasn't enough, but it was something. She slept for 4 hours, her hand curled around the M9 pistol she kept under her pillow. Her dreams were filled with the sounds of gunfire and the screams of men dying, and when she woke at 0500, her uniform was soaked with sweat. The morning air was cold, carrying the bite of the mountains that surrounded FOB Hammerfall on 3 sides. Maya, dressed in her full kit, body armor, helmet, tactical vest loaded with ammunition and medical supplies. She checked her M4A1 carbine 3 times, ensuring the optics were zeroed, the magazine seated properly, the safety functional. She arrived at the vehicle staging area at 0700 to find Dominguez already there, conducting pre-mission checks on the lead MRAP. He looked up as she approached, his expression neutral. "Captain, Sergeant, you read the patrol brief?" "Twice." He nodded slowly. "Then you know we're moving through Carwin Pass. Tight terrain, limited maneuver space. If anything goes wrong in there, It's a kill box, Maya finished. Perfect conditions for an L-shaped ambush with enfilade fire from the high ground. The enemy could engage us for up to 15 minutes before we could establish any kind of defensive perimeter. Dominguez's eyebrows rose slightly. You've done your homework. It's my job, Sergeant. For a moment, something shifted in his expression. Not respect, exactly. Not yet, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement that she wasn't entirely useless. Stick close to me when we dismount, he said finally. Keep your head on a swivel. And if I tell you get down, you get down. No hesitation. No questions. Understood. Understood. The rest of the patrol arrived over the next 20 minutes. 12 soldiers in total, divided between 3 vehicles. 2 MRAPs and a Humvee with a .50 caliber mounted in the turret. Staff Sergeant Volkov commanded the trail vehicle. He ignored Maya completely as he conducted his pre-mission brief, directing his comments to the soldiers around him as if she were invisible. At 0730 exactly, the convoy rolled out to the main gate of FOB Hammerfall. The road to Darwiski wound through terrain that had been old when Alexander the Great marched his armies through these same valleys 2,000 years ago. Mountains rose on either side, their slopes scarred with the ruins of Soviet-era fortifications and the more recent debris of American airstrikes. The villages they passed were collections of mud brick compounds clustered around irrigation canals, their inhabitants watching the convoy pass with expressions that revealed nothing. Maya sat in the rear seat of the lead MRAP, her rifle across her knees, her eyes scanning the terrain through the ballistic window. She noted every potential ambush position, every choke point, every piece of high ground that offered advantage to an attacker. The radio crackled. Viper 2-1, this is Hammerfall to see. Sitrep, over. Dominguez keyed his handset. Hammerfall, Viper 2-1. We are 5 kilometers out from Objective Falcon. No contact. Continuing mission, over. Roger, Viper 2-1. Be advised, Reaper flight has been diverted to support operations in Kandahar province. Closest air asset is now Cobra flight out of BF. 40+ mics response time. Acknowledge. Maya's blood went cold. 40 minutes. The air support that Weston had promised was 40 minutes away. If her analysis was correct, if Shaheen was planning an ambush on this route, they would have no fast reaction capability. They would be entirely on their own. She leaned forward. Sergeant, did you hear that? Dominguez's jaw tightened. I heard it. We should consider. Consider what, Captain? Turning back? Abandoning the mission because air support got moved. He shook his head. We don't have that luxury. The intel from Darwiski could prevent attacks that killed dozens of soldiers. We pushed forward. At least let me radio my assessment to Hammerfall. Let them know. Let them know what? That you have a bad feeling? That's not intelligence, Captain. That's superstition. Now stay off the net and let me do my job. Maya sat back, her hands gripping her rifle so hard her knuckles went white. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist, but she knew it would accomplish nothing. Dominguez had made his decision. The patrol would continue. All she could do was watch and wait and pray she was wrong. The car wouldn't pass open before them like the mouth of a beast waiting to swallow them whole. The road narrowed to a single lane, flanked by steep slopes that rose 30 meters on either side. Boulders the size of automobiles dotted the terrain, providing perfect concealment for fighters with RPGs and machine guns. The sky above was a pale strip of blue, visible only through the gap between the ridgelines. Maya's skin prickled with a sensation of being watched. She scanned the slopes through her rifle optic, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing, just rock and dust and the occasional scrub brush clinging to the mountainside. But the silence was wrong. There should have been goats. There should have been shepherds. In every village they had passed, there had been livestock grazing on the slopes, and children playing in the roads, and women carrying water from communal wells. Here, there was nothing. The valley was empty. Sergeant, Maya said quietly. I see it, Dominguez replied. His voice had changed. The dismissiveness was gone, replaced by the focused calm of a man who had been in combat too many times to ignore his instincts. He keyed his radio. All Viper elements. This is 2-1 actual. Reduce speed, increase spacing, weapons free. Something doesn't feel right. The convoy slowed. Maya watched the gun in the turret above her traverse his weapon back and forth, searching for targets. Her finger moved from the trigger guard to rest alongside the trigger itself. They were 800 meters into the pass when she saw it. A flicker of movement on the northern ridge, barely visible, a patch of shadow that shifted when it shouldn't have. Contact north, Maya shouted. Northern ridge, 200 meters. I have movement. I don't see anything, the gunner replied. Where? Just below the large boulder at your 10 o'clock. Theirs. The world exploded. The IED had been buried in the road surface, packed with 30 kilograms of homemade explosive, and surrounded by scrap metal designed to shred anything within 20 meters. It detonated directly beneath the Humvee at the rear of the convoy, lifting the 3-ton vehicle into the air like a child's toy. When it came down, it landed on its side, fuel streaming from ruptured tanks. The .50 cal turret crushed beyond recognition. 3 soldiers died in that first second. Specialist Brennan, who had started the betting pool, Private First Class Ortega, who had a daughter he had never met, Corporal Williams, who had been counting down the days until his rotation ended. They never knew what hit them. The ambush erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. PKM machine guns opened fire from positions on both ridgelines, their rounds converging on the kill zone with devastating accuracy. RPG teams launched their rockets at the lead MRAP, the first warhead striking the engine block and sending a plume of black smoke into the sky. Rifle fire crackled from behind boulders and from spider holes that had been invisible until the fighters rose from their concealment. Maya saw the gunner above her take a round through the throat. He slumped sideways, blood spraying across the interior of the turret, his weapon falling silent. Out! Everyone out! Dominguez was screaming. Dismount, dismount, get to cover. The rear door of the MRAP flew open. Maya threw herself through it, hitting the ground hard, rolling behind the bulk of the disabled vehicle as bullets tore up the dirt where she had been standing a heartbeat before. Her training took over. Her mind became crystal clear, every sense heightened, every detail burning itself into her consciousness with perfect clarity. She counted muzzle flashes. 14, 16, 18. The enemy had at least 20 fighters engaging them, probably more. The fire was coordinated, disciplined, shifting from target to target with the precision of men who had rehearsed this exact scenario. Dominguez was down. She saw him lying 3 meters away, clutching his leg, blood pouring between his fingers. The radio handset was still in his other hand, and he was screaming into it, calling for support that was 40 minutes away. 2 other soldiers had made it to cover. The rest were either dead or pinned inside the remaining MRAP, unable to move without being cut down. Staff Sergeant Volkov's voice crackled over the radio. 2-1 actual, this is 2-3, I have 5 effectives. We are pinned behind the Humvee wreckage, taking heavy fire from the South Ridge. Cannot maneuver, over. 5 effectives, plus the 2 soldiers near Maya, plus Dominguez, who was wounded but still conscious. 8 survivors out of 12, and the enemy fire was only intensifying. Maya pressed herself against the MRAP's armored hull, her mind racing through options. They couldn't stay here. The Taliban would advance, close the distance, and finish them off. They couldn't retreat. The road behind them was blocked by the burning Humvee and covered by machine gun fire. They couldn't call for help. Air support was 40 minutes away, and the FOB's quick reaction force would take at least 30 to mount up and reach their position. They were going to die here. Unless she did something impossible. Maya closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, and in that darkness, 5 years of studying Taliban tactical doctrine assembled itself into a coherent picture. The ambush geometry, the command and control structure, the way Shaheen's fighters positioned their command element to maintain coordination across multiple firing positions. There, the northern ridge, the large boulder she had spotted movement behind before the ambush. That was the command post. That was where Shaheen, or his local commander, was directing the fight. That was the brain of the ambush. Kill the brain, and the body would die. Maya keyed her radio. All Viper elements. This is Captain Reeves. I have a plan. Listen carefully. Volkov's voice came back immediately. Stay off the net, Captain. You don't have tactical authority. Staff Sergeant, shut up and listen. We have 40 minutes until air support arrives. We cannot survive 40 minutes of sustained fire. Our only option is to break the ambush before it breaks us. I need covering fire on the southern ridge, while I lead a team to assault the enemy command position on the northern slope. Acknowledge. You want to assault uphill into an entrenched enemy position? That's suicide. Staying here is suicide. At least this way we have a chance. Now are you going to provide covering fire, or are you going to sit there and watch us all die? Silence. Then Volkov's voice, grudging but compliant. 2-3 copies. Standing by to provide suppressive fire. On your command. Maya turned to the two soldiers beside her, Private First Class Jackson and Specialist Torres. Both were barely out of training, their faces pale with fear, their hands shaking as they gripped their rifles. On me, Maya said. We're going up that slope. Stay low, move fast, and don't stop for anything. When we reach the command position, you engage any targets you see while I locate and eliminate the commander. Questions? Jackson's voice cracked. Ma'am, I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. Maya locked eyes with him. You're scared. That's good. Fear keeps you alive. But right now, I need you to turn that fear into aggression. Think about the 3 men we just lost. Think about their families. Think about the fact that the only way you're going home is if we take that ridge. Can you do that? Jackson swallowed hard, then nodded. Good. On my mark, Volkov's team opens fire. We move 3 seconds later. Ready? Both soldiers nodded. Maya keyed her radio one last time. 2-3, commence suppressive fire. Now! The world erupted in noise and fury. Volkov's team opened up with everything they had, pouring rounds into the southern ridge, forcing the enemy fighters to duck and seek cover. For a precious few seconds, the volume of incoming fire diminished. Maya was already moving. She sprinted from behind the MRAP, her boots churning up dust as she ran toward the base of the northern slope. Bullets snapped past her, close enough that she could feel the pressure waves. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't slow down. Momentum was the only thing keeping her alive. Jackson and Torres were right behind her. She heard their breathing, their footsteps, their terrified curses as they climbed. The slope was steeper than it had looked from below. Loose scree shifted under her boots, threatening to send her tumbling back down. She grabbed rocks with her free hand. Hauling herself upward, her rifle clutched against her chest. 50 meters, then 40, then 30. A fighter rose from behind a boulder directly ahead, his AK-47 swinging toward her face. Maya fired first. 3 rounds, center mass. The man crumpled. She didn't stop moving. She stepped over his body and kept climbing, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. Every muscle in her body pushed past its limits. The command post was just ahead. She could see it now, a natural depression behind a large boulder, with clear sight lines to the kill zone below. 2 fighters crouched there, one with binoculars, the other speaking rapidly into a handheld radio. Maya killed the radio operator first. 2 rounds, then pivoted and put 3 into the man with the binoculars before he could react. Movement to her left. She spun, finger tightening on the trigger. The bullet hit her before she saw the shooter. It felt like being punched by a giant. The impact spun her sideways, drove the air from her lungs, sent her stumbling backward. She looked down and saw blood spreading across her uniform, staining the desert camouflage pattern a deep, wet red. Left side, below the armor plate. The round had found a gap between her vest and her hip, punching through muscle and lodging somewhere inside her. The pain hadn't arrived yet. It would, she knew, but for now, there was only cold clarity and the absolute certainty that she was not going to die on this hillside. She raised her rifle and fired at the shooter who had hit her. The man fell. She fired again at another figure emerging from behind a rock. He fell too. Jackson and Torres reached the command post, their weapons up, scanning for targets. Torres spotted a fighter trying to flee down the back slope and dropped him with a burst of automatic fire. Then silence. Maya leaned against the boulder, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pain was starting now, radiating outward from her side in waves of liquid fire. She pressed her hand against the wound and felt blood seeping between her fingers. Captain, Jackson was beside her, his face pale with shock. You're hit, ma'am. You're bleeding bad. I know. Maya's voice was steady despite the agony. I need you to apply pressure while I assess the situation. Can you do that? Aye, yes, ma'am. Jackson's hands replaced hers on the wound. She gasped at the pressure, but forced herself to focus. The ambush, the remaining fighters, her people below. She grabbed her radio. Viper 2-3, this is Reeves. Enemy command post neutralized. What's your status? Static. Then Volkov's voice, sounding like he was speaking from a dream. Command post neutralized? You actually... Status, Staff Sergeant. Now, enemy fire has dropped significantly. They're not coordinating anymore. Some fighters are withdrawing to the north, just as she had predicted. Cut off the head, and the body dies. Push them, Maya ordered. Keep up the pressure. Don't let them regroup. Copy that. A pause. Captain, that was one hell of a move. She didn't respond. The edges of her vision were going gray, the pain threatening to pull her under. She had maybe 10 minutes before blood loss made her combat ineffective. Possibly less. But the ambush was broken. Her people were going to survive. Jackson, she said quietly, help me back down the slope. We need to consolidate with the others and prepare for evac. Ma'am, you shouldn't move. The bleeding is manageable. Let's go. The descent was agony. Every step sent fresh waves of pain through her body. Jackson supported her on one side, Torres on the other, both soldiers moving with the desperate urgency of men who had just witnessed something they would spend the rest of their lives trying to process. When they reached the valley floor, Maya found Dominguez sitting up against a disabled MRAP, a tourniquet cinched tight around his thigh. He watched her approach with an expression she couldn't read. Captain, he said slowly. Sergeant, you took the command post. I did. 14 kills. I counted. You personally killed 14 enemy fighters in under 6 minutes. Maya lowered herself to the ground beside him, grimacing as the movement shifted the bullet lodged in her side. I wasn't counting. Dominguez shook his head slowly. In 20 years of service, I have never seen anyone do what you just did. Never. I've seen Special Forces operators, Delta guys, SEALs. None of them could have pulled that off. He paused. I owe you my life. Everyone here owes you their life. You don't owe me anything, Sergeant. I was doing my job. No. His voice hardened. You were doing our job because we weren't capable of doing it ourselves. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure everyone knows it. The sound of helicopter rotors reached them before Maya could respond. Black Hawks, coming in fast from the east. Air support had finally arrived, but the fight was already over. The 8 survivors of Viper 2-1 were evacuated to FOB Hammerfall within the hour. Maya was rushed into surgery to remove the bullet from her side, a procedure that took 3 hours and left her with a scar she would carry for the rest of her life. When she woke in the medical tent, Colonel James Harrington was sitting beside her bed. She had never met the colonel before. He commanded the entire brigade operating in Darwas province, a man responsible for over 4,000 soldiers and the outcome of operations that would shape the future of the region for years to come. He was reading a document when she opened her eyes. As she stirred, he looked up and she saw something in his expression that she had almost never seen directed at her during her military career. Respect. Captain Reeves, he said. How are you feeling? Alive, sir. Her voice was rough, her throat dry. How are my people? All 8 survivors are stable. 3 in surgery, but they'll make it. The men you lost, Brennan, Ortega, and Williams, their remains have been recovered and are being prepared for transport home. Maya closed her eyes. 3 dead. She had known it from the moment the IED detonated, but hearing confirmed was different. Final. 3 soldiers who would never see their families again, would never grow old, would never have the futures they had dreamed about. Captain. The colonel's voice was gentle but insistent. Look at me. She opened her eyes. Those 3 men were dead before the ambush properly began. The IED was command detonated the instant your convoy entered the kill zone. There was nothing you could have done to save them. But the 8 who survived, they're alive because of you. Because you saw what was happening and you acted. Do you understand what that means? It means I did what had to be done, sir. It means you did what no one else could have done, or would have done. Harrington leaned forward. I've read the after-action reports. All of them. I've interviewed every survivor. I know exactly what happened in that valley. Captain, and I want you to know that what you accomplished was extraordinary. Maya said nothing. She wasn't sure what response was appropriate. There's something else, Harrington continued. The intelligence your team recovered from the command post, the radio, the maps, the documentation the enemy commander was carrying. It's some of the most significant actionable intelligence we've gathered in months. My analysts have been going through it for the past 12 hours. It includes detailed plans for an attack on FOB Hammerfall, coordinated assault from 3 directions, using over 80 fighters and multiple suicide bombers. The attack was scheduled for 72 hours from now. Maya's heart stopped. Sir, because of what you recovered, we've been able to identify the staging areas, the infiltration routes, and the identities of the key leaders. We're rolling up the network as we speak. The attack will never happen. Dozens of soldiers, perhaps hundreds, will live because you climbed that ridge. The weight of it settled over Maya like a physical thing. She had known the intelligence was important. She hadn't known it would save the entire FOB. I'm recommending you for the Silver Star, Harrington said, for valor in combat above and beyond expectations. The paperwork is already in process. Sir, I don't need. It's not about what you need, Captain. It's about what you deserve, and about making sure that everyone knows what you accomplished. He paused. However, there is a complication. Maya felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Sir, the Pentagon has become aware of your actions, and certain individuals within the senior leadership are uncomfortable with the optics. The optics? A female intelligence officer with no combat arms background, leading a direct assault on an enemy position, killing 14 enemy fighters single-handedly, taking command of patrol over the objections of senior NCOs. Harrington's expression darkened. There are people in Washington who believe the story should be managed, contained, reframed, buried. Yes. Maya felt the anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp and overwhelming. She had almost died on that hillside. 3 of her fellow soldiers had died. She had done everything they asked and more, had proved herself in the most absolute terms possible, and still, it wasn't enough. What are you telling me, Colonel? I'm telling you that you have a choice to make. Harrington's voice was hard now, the tone of a man who had made his own decision and was waiting to see if she would make the same one. The Pentagon wants you transferred out of theater. Quietly. No medal ceremony, no official recognition, just a routine rotation back to a desk job at Fort Huachuca where you could be forgotten. And if I refuse, then you go on record. Officially, your actions become part of the permanent record, available for anyone to see. The Pentagon can't actually stop the award process once it's initiated. They can only delay it, make it uncomfortable, apply pressure. His eyes met hers. But make no mistake, Captain. If you choose to fight this, you will be fighting the entire military establishment. Your career will be marked. Doors will close. Opportunities will evaporate. And if I go quietly, then you survive. You continue your career. You never have to deal with any of this again. He paused. It's a practical choice. A smart choice. Most people in your position would take it. Maya was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her mother. Dying by inches, never once asking to be protected from reality. She thought about the 3 soldiers who had died in that valley, and the 8 who had lived. She thought about every betting pool, every dismissive comment, every assumption that had followed her through her entire career. Colonel, she said finally, do you know why I joined the Army? I can't say that I do. My father was military. 20 years in the infantry, combat veteran, 3 deployments. When I was growing up, he used to tell me stories about the soldiers he served with, the brave ones, the cowardly ones, the ones who surprised everyone. And every time he told those stories, I noticed something. The heroes were always men. She shifted in her bed, ignoring the pain in her side. One day, when I was 14, I asked him if there were any women heroes in the Army. He laughed. Not cruelly. He wasn't a cruel man, but like I had asked a silly question. And he said, Maya, women serve in the Army. They do important work. But combat is different. Combat is where heroes are made, and that's not a place for women. Harrington said nothing. He was wrong, Colonel. Not about combat. He was right that combat is where heroes are made. But he was wrong about who could make them. And I've spent my entire career proving that. She met his eyes. I'm not going to let the Pentagon decide that my story doesn't matter because it doesn't fit their narrative. Those 3 soldiers who died deserve better than that. The 8 who survived deserve better. I deserve better. So you're refusing to transfer? I'm refusing to be erased, sir. Harrington was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Good, he said. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. He stood, straightening his uniform. I've already informed the Pentagon that I will not be implementing their recommended course of action. I've also informed them that if they attempt to interfere with the awards process, I will resign my commission and take the story public myself. Maya stared at him. Sir, you earned that medal, Captain, and more importantly, you earned the right to have your story told. I'm not going to let bureaucrats in Washington take that away, because they're uncomfortable with a woman being better at combat than the men around her. The Pentagon will destroy your career. Perhaps. Harrington shrugged. I've had a long career, Captain. 32 years. I've done things I'm proud of and things I'm not. But if I let them bury your story, I would spend the rest of my life knowing I failed when it mattered most. He paused at the door. The ceremony is in 48 hours. I expect you to be there, injuries or not. Dismissed. He left. Maya lay back in her bed, her mind spinning. She had expected a fight. She had expected resistance. She had not expected Colonel James Harrington to risk his entire career to defend hers. Maybe, she thought, there were more allies in this army than she had realized. The 48 hours passed in a blur of medical treatments, debriefings, and visitors. Dominguez came first, still limping from his leg wound, to personally thank her for saving his life. Then Jackson and Torres, both looking shell-shocked but alive. Even Volkov showed up, standing awkwardly at the foot of her bed, his usual hostility replaced by something that looked almost like shame. I was wrong about you, he said finally. I thought you were going to get us killed. Instead, you saved us all. You provided the covering fire that made the assault possible, Staff Sergeant. We saved each other. Volkov shook his head. That's generous of you to say, Captain, but we both know the truth. He hesitated. The betting pool, I want you to know, I've ended it. And I've told everyone involved that if I hear another word about it, they'll answer to me personally. I appreciate that, Staff Sergeant. It's the least I could do. He turned to leave, then paused. Captain, for what it's worth, I'd serve under you again. Anytime, anywhere. Coming from Volkov, it was the highest compliment possible. The ceremony took place on parade ground at FOB Hammerfall, with the entire garrison assembled in formation. Maya stood at attention beside the flagpole, her dress uniform pressed despite the bandages still wrapped around her torso, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Colonel Harrington stood at the podium, facing the assembled soldiers. On the 17th of October, he began, his voice carrying across the parade ground. A patrol-designated Viper 2-1 came under enemy ambush in the Carwin Pass. 3 soldiers were killed instantly. 5 were wounded. 8 survivors were pinned in a kill zone with no air support and facing an enemy force that outnumbered them 3-1. He paused, letting the words sink in. In that moment, Captain Maya Reeves, an intelligence officer with no combat arms background, a woman serving a role that many in this army believe should be off limits to her gender, did something that I have rarely seen in 32 years of service. She took command. She assessed the situation. She identified the enemy's center of gravity, their command and control element, and she led a 3-person assault directly into enemy fire to eliminate it. In the space of 6 minutes, Captain Reeves personally killed 14 enemy combatants. She destroyed the enemy's ability to coordinate their ambush. She broke the back of a force that should have annihilated her patrol. And she did all of this while suffering a gunshot wound that would have incapacitated most soldiers. Harrington turned to look directly at Maya. There are some people who believe this story should be hidden, who believe that a woman achieving what Captain Reeves achieved is somehow inconvenient, or embarrassing, or politically complicated. His voice hardened. Those people are wrong. Excellence does not care about gender. Courage does not care about what role you were assigned. And heroism, true heroism, cannot be hidden simply because it arrives in an unexpected form. He picked up a velvet case on the podium and crossed to where Maya stood. She could feel the eyes of every soldier on the parade ground fixed on her back. Captain Maya Reeves, for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States, for valor above and beyond the call of duty, and for single-handedly preventing the deaths of 8 American soldiers, I hereby award you the Silver Star for combat valor. He pinned the medal to her chest. The silver glinted in the Afghan sun. Your actions on the 17th of October saved American lives, recovered intelligence that prevented a major attack on this installation, and demonstrated the kind of courage that this army and this nation should aspire to. He stepped back and saluted. Maya returned it, her hand trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. This is what a hero looks like, Harrington said, his voice carrying across the parade ground. Remember it. The formation broke into applause. It started slowly, a few soldiers clapping, then more still, until the sound washed over Maya like a wave. She saw Dominguez in the front row, tears streaming down his face. She saw Jackson and Torres, their hands red from clapping. She saw Volkov, his expression fierce, leading a chant that spread through the ranks. Reeves! 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 She had spent her entire career being told she didn't belong, being dismissed, being underestimated, being made to feel like an intruder in a world that wasn't meant for her. Now, standing on that parade ground with a silver star on her chest and the voices of 4,000 soldiers echoing around her, she finally felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. She felt like she had come home. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The Pentagon's attempts to suppress her story collapsed in the face of Colonel Harrington's defiance and the testimony of every soldier who had been there. Major Weston was quietly transferred to a desk job stateside, his career effectively over. The intelligence Maya had recovered led to the arrest or elimination of 17 high-value targets, effectively decapitating Taliban operations in Darwas province. Maya herself was promoted to major and offered a position at the Pentagon, the very institution that had tried to silence her. She declined. Instead, she requested assignment to a special operations advisory role, where she could continue to work directly with soldiers in the field. You could have a comfortable career in Washington, Colonel Harrington told her when she informed him of her decision. Air conditioning, regular hours, no one shooting at you. With respect, sir, that's not why I joined the Army. He smiled. No, I suppose it isn't. On her last night at FOB Hammerfall, Maya walked the memorial wall, where the names of soldiers killed in action were etched into stone. She found the 3 newest additions: Brennan, Ortega, Williams. She touched each name with her fingertips, feeling the rough texture of the engraving. I couldn't save you, she said quietly. I'm sorry, but I promise you, your deaths weren't meaningless. The intelligence we recovered, the attack we prevented, the lives we saved, that's your legacy as much as mine, maybe more. She stood there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead. The Afghan night was cold and clear, and the mountains that had almost been her tomb rose dark against the horizon. She thought about her father and the stories he used to tell, and the heroes who were always men. She thought about her mother, fighting a battle she couldn't win, never once backing down. She thought about the soldiers she had served with, the ones who had doubted her, and the ones who had believed in her, and the ones who had died beside her. And she thought about the future, the battles still to come, the soldiers who would need someone to lead them, the assumptions that would need to be broken. She was ready. Dawn broke over the mountains 3 days later. Maya stood at the edge of the helicopter pad, her gear packed, waiting for the Chinook that would take her to her next assignment. The FOB was quiet in the early morning light, the soldiers not on duty, still sleeping in their racks. Footsteps approached behind her. She turned to find Sergeant First Class Dominguez walking toward her, his legs still wrapped but no longer requiring a crutch. Figure I'd find you here, he said. Couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye. I appreciate that, Sergeant. He stood beside her, watching the sun climb above the peaks. For a long moment, neither spoke. You know, Dominguez said finally, I've been in this army for 20 years. I've served with hundreds of officers. Some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. He turned to look at her. I've never served with anyone like you. I'm just a soldier, Sergeant. Same as you. No. He shook his head. You're not, and that's not a bad thing. You see things the rest of us don't see. You do things the rest of us can't do. And you don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to be. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, A patch, worn and faded, bearing the insignia of the 101st Airborne Division. "This was my father's," he said. "He wore it in Vietnam. Gave it to me when I enlisted. Said it was a reminder that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He pressed it into her hand. "I want you to have it." Maya looked down at the patch, then back up at Dominguez. "Sergeant, I can't." "You can, and you will." His voice was firm. "Because you earned it. Because my father would have wanted you to have it. And because someday when you're training the next generation of soldiers, you can tell them what real courage looks like." The sound of rotors reached them. The Chinook was approaching from the east, its twin engines roaring against the morning silence. Maya tucked the patch into her pocket. "Thank you, Sergeant, for everything." "No, ma'am." Dominguez stepped back and snapped to attention, his hand rising in a perfect salute. "Thank you." Maya returned the salute, holding it for a long moment. Then the helicopter was landing, dust swirling around them, and it was time to go. She climbed aboard, found a seat near the rear, and watched through the window as FOB Hammerfall receded into the distance. The mountains rose around her, ancient and indifferent, guardians of secrets that humans would never fully understand. She thought about everything she had lost, the soldiers who had died, the innocence she had given up, the comfortable certainty that hard work and dedication would be enough to overcome prejudice. She thought about everything she had gained, the respect of warriors who had spent their careers dismissing women like her, the knowledge that she was capable of things she had never imagined, the medal that hung in a case in her footlocker, proof that heroism came in many forms. And she thought about everything that lay ahead. The battle still to fight, some with enemies who carried weapons, others with enemies who wore the same uniform she did. The assumptions that would need to be challenged, the doors that would need to be opened. She wasn't naive. She knew that one act of heroism wouldn't change the military overnight. She knew there would be more betting pools, more dismissive comments, more officers who saw her gender before they saw her capabilities. But she also knew something else. She knew that every barrier eventually falls. Every assumption eventually crumbles. Every wall, no matter how thick, can be breached by someone willing to pay the price. She had paid that price on a hillside in the Carwin Pass, with blood and pain, and the lives of 3 soldiers who deserved to come home, and she would keep paying it, for as long as it took, until no woman who came after her would ever have to prove that she was built for combat. The helicopter banked east, climbing over the mountains toward the rising sun. Maya leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She had work to do. 6 months later, Maya stood in the main hall of the Pentagon, wearing her dress blues, the silver star prominent on her chest. Around her, 100 generals, colonels, and civilian officials waited in polished silence. She was here to brief the Joint Chiefs on the intelligence methodology she had developed, the same methodology that had allowed her to predict the ambush at Carwin Pass and the subsequent attack on FOB Hammerfall. She thought about the young captain who had stepped off that Chinook at FOB Hammerfall, terrified but determined, the woman who had been the subject of betting pools and whispered insults, the officer who had been told, in 1,000 ways both subtle and explicit, that she didn't belong. That woman was gone. In her place stood something harder, something sharper, something forged in fire and tempered by sacrifice. The briefing went flawlessly. Maya presented her analysis methodology with the precision of a surgeon, answering questions from 4-star generals with the same confidence she had shown when leading an assault uphill against entrenched enemy fighters. When she finished, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a man who had been skeptical of her presence from the moment she walked in, stood and offered his hand. "Major Reeves," he said, "this is some of the most impressive analytical work I've seen in 20 years. If your methods can be scaled across the force, we could save thousands of lives." "That's the goal, sir." He held her gaze for a moment. "I've read your Silver Star citation 3 times. Each time, I'm more impressed than the last." He paused. "My daughter is thinking about applying to West Point. Do you mind if I tell her about you?" Maya felt something shift in her chest. Something warm and unexpected. "I'd be honored, sir." She walked out of the Pentagon into the October afternoon, the sky above Washington gray, with approaching autumn. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dominguez, who had returned to active duty and was now training a new generation of NCOs. Heard the brief went well. Proud of you, ma'am. Airborne all the way. She smiled and typed a response. Couldn't have done it without you. Say hello to the new soldiers for me. As she walked toward her car, she passed a group of young cadets, West Point seniors on a field trip, their faces full of the eager determination that she remembered from her own youth. Among them, she noticed a young woman with dark hair and fierce eyes, walking slightly apart from the others, her expression suggesting she was used to being underestimated. Maya stopped. Cadet, she said. The young woman looked up, startled. Her eyes flicked to Maya's rank insignia, then to the silver star, then back to her face. Ma'am, what's your name? Cadet Lieutenant Sarah Park, ma'am. Park. Maya nodded. Tell me, Cadet Park, what branch are you hoping to enter after graduation? The young woman hesitated. Military intelligence, ma'am, though my TAC officer thinks I should reconsider. He says intel isn't where the action is. Maya almost laughed. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out Dominguez's father's patch, the 101st Airborne insignia she had carried with her every day since leaving Afghanistan. Your TAC officer is wrong, she said. Intelligence is exactly where the action is. You just have to be willing to go where the intelligence leads you, even if that means climbing a mountain under enemy fire to prove your point. She pressed the patch into the young woman's hand. Keep this. Someday, when you're wondering if you belong, look at it and remember, courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Cadet Park looked down at the patch, then back up at Maya. Her eyes were wide. Ma'am, who are you? Maya smiled. Just a soldier. Same as you. She turned and walked away, leaving the young woman standing on the Pentagon steps, holding a piece of history in her hands. The sun was setting over Washington, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Maya climbed into her car and sat for a moment, watching the light fade. She thought about the soldier she had been, and the soldier she had become, and the soldiers who would come after her. She thought about barriers and assumptions and the slow, painful work of changing minds. She thought about Brennan, Ortega, and Williams, 3 names on a wall, 3 soldiers who would never come home. And she thought about all the women who would serve after her, the lieutenants and captains and majors who would face the same doubts, the same dismissals, the same whispered comments. But they would face them knowing that someone had gone before them. Someone had proven that the assumptions were wrong. She started the engine and pulled out onto the highway, heading toward a future she couldn't quite see but was no longer afraid to face. They had said she wasn't built for combat. They had been wrong. And now, thanks to a colonel who refused to let the truth be buried, everyone knew it. Captain Maya Reeves' story shows us that courage doesn't care about gender, and excellence cannot be hidden simply because it arrives in an unexpected form. If this story kept you engaged, hit that like button and show your support. Tell me in the comments, would you have risked everything to defy orders and lead that assault, or would you have waited for air support? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. See you in the next one.